Hello, you are watching the Look Up channel. My name is Yuriy Matsarsky. Only 4 months ago I was a journalist, but quit the job after the beginning of a full-scale Russian invasion. Quit and joined the Ukrainian army. I don't want to cut all the ties with my previous profession. That is why you are watching me right now. I'm here to help you better understand Ukraine, the causes of the current war and the features of our enemy. Let's start with the enemy. This enemy is not only Putin. Of course, he was the man who unleashed the bloodiest war in Europe since the Second World War. But millions of Russians support him in this. They dream of destroying Ukraine as a state and Ukrainians as a nation. Why? It is all about the perverted perception of the world. Perverted but declared in Russia to be the only true one. We laugh, and not without reason, at people who believe that our planet is flat or that intelligent reptiles rule the world. We call these people conspiracy freaks and think of them as funny, harmless eccentrics who are only capable of writing stupid social media posts. But unfortunately, this view is not always true. For example, Hitler was a conspiracy freak. He believed in the crazy racial theory and sincerely thought that the Germans were destined for the role of masters over all other peoples. This blind faith led to the most massive war in human history, the Holocaust, and the tens of millions of victims. So conspiracies can be dangerous, really dangerous, and we in Ukraine unfortunately felt it in full. The Russian army invaded us largely because of the conspiracy, because of the conviction of large numbers of people in Russia, including the top leadership of the country, that Ukrainians do not exist, that Ukrainians are a fictional nation, moreover, the nation invented by the enemies of Russia. I think they regard the independence of all the former republics of the USSR as some kind of absurd accident, a deviation that will be corrected in the future. But it is Ukraine that occupies a special place in this worldview. Since the time of the Russian Empire, Russians have been engaged in the forced assimilation of the people who lived on the territory of this empire. All subjects of the emperors had to be more or less the same, which means be at least a little but Russian. The empire was especially zealous in the assimilation of the Ukrainians. Firstly, the majority of Ukrainians, like Russians, are Orthodox, and secondly, both of them are Slavs. These common points were enough to the empire to deny the Ukrainians the right to be a separate nation. The differences of one people from another, the empire simply don't want to see. Contrary to the claims of Russian propaganda, both imperial or Soviet and current, there has never been any voluntary entry of Ukraine into Russia. There was a long and very bloody process of conquest of Ukrainian lands, which dragged on for centuries, and in which the Russians did not disdain anything. Genocide, bribery, deception, a ban of the language, and mass deportations deep into the empire, all this done so that Ukrainians would forget that they were Ukrainians and began to consider themselves Russians, obey the Russian ruler, and would not even dream of independence. The Russians failed to make Ukrainians believe that they are not Ukrainians at all, but Russians were engaged in the eradication of everything Ukrainian with such enthusiasm that they themselves believed in their fiction. For generations, Russians have seriously considered those people who call themselves Ukrainian deceived by some insidious enemy, misled and forgotten that they are not Ukrainians, but they are just southwestern Russians. During the First World War, the Russians said that the very idea of a Ukrainian nation was invented in the Austro-Hungarian General Staff. After it, that Ukrainians are Russians deceived by the Poles. Now Russians firmly believe that Ukraine and Ukrainians were invented by NATO to spite Moscow. The Russians are most likely not the first and certainly not the only ones to declare another people a deceived and corrupted part of their nation. For example, Serbian nationalists who unleashed a whole series of bloody wars in the former Yugoslavia in the 90s of the last century had the same attitude towards Bosnian Muslims. Serbian politicians claimed that the Bosnians were really Serbs, whom either the Ottoman authorities or the communists of Josip Tito convinced that they were not Serbs. But we digress a little. So the Russians drew a picture of the world for themselves in which, on the one hand, there are a beautiful beautiful and great way, on the other a nightmarish evil West, and in the middle between of these two poles, spoiled Russians who, under the influence of this evil West, imagined themselves as a separate Ukrainian nation. In this crooked picture of the world, Russians see themselves not as the murderers and rapists who have invaded a foreign country, but as the heroes who have come to punish misguided people who have decided that they are not Russians. In their conspiracy theories, this is the highest virtue, but in the world of normal people, Russians are just bandits who must be defeated and punished for all these monstrous crimes that they have committed. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Look Up channel and see you soon. Bye!